The retirement watch gleamed under the display case lights at Whitfield Jewelers in downtown Charleston. 18-karat gold, engraved caseback, the kind of timepiece a man buys once in his lifetime. I was picking it out for myself. 67 years old, 41 years running Callaway Coastal Freight, and next Saturday my son was throwing me a retirement celebration at the Harbor Grand Ballroom. 200 guests. Live band. A night I had been looking forward to since my wife Diane passed 4 years ago. She always said I worked too much. I figured retiring was the least I could do to honor her memory. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel, and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. The jeweler was explaining the Swiss movement when my phone vibrated against the glass counter. I glanced down, expecting a shipping manifest or a dock schedule. Instead, I saw a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. A 404 area code. Atlanta. I held the phone to my ear. The voice was distorted, like someone speaking through fabric. "Mr. Callaway, you don't know me, but I work at Meridian Legal Group in Atlanta. Your son and his wife have been meeting with a partner here for the past 3 months. They're not planning a retirement party. They're planning a conservatorship. Don't sign anything your son gives you this week. Don't trust your doctor's appointment on Monday. And whatever you do, don't drink the scotch." The message ended. I played it again. Then a third time. The jeweler asked if I was feeling all right. I told her I was fine. Just wedding planning stress for a friend. And I signed the receipt for $11,400 without remembering a single detail of the transaction. In my truck, I sat in the parking garage for 20 minutes staring at the phone. My hands were shaking, and it wasn't the caffeine from this morning's coffee. I called the number back. Disconnected. I tried again. Same dead tone. Conservatorship. The word sat in my chest like an anchor. My son, Derek, the boy I'd taught to tie bowling knots on the company tugboats. The kid who cried when his dog got hit by a car in 9th grade. My son was trying to take away my legal rights. I wanted to drive straight to his house in Mount Pleasant and demand an explanation. Instead, I sat there and thought like the businessman I'd been for 4 decades. If someone sends you an anonymous warning, you don't charge in blind. You gather intelligence first. I drove to the office instead. Callaway Coastal Freight occupied a sprawling complex near the port of Charleston. 18 warehouses, 47 trucks, contracts with shipping companies across the eastern seaboard. I'd built it from a single pickup truck and a handshake deal with a soybean farmer in 1983. The company was valued at $64 million as of last quarter's independent audit. My assistant, Brenda, looked surprised to see me. "Mr. Callaway, I thought you were taking the week off before the party." Changed my mind. "Brenda, I need you to pull every document Derek has accessed through the company server in the past 6 months. Login records, file downloads, print jobs, everything." She didn't ask why. Brenda had worked for me for 22 years. She knew when I was in investigation mode. While she compiled the records, I locked my office door and opened my laptop. Meridian Legal Group, Atlanta. A quick search confirmed it was real. Boutique firm specializing in estate planning, elder law, and asset protection. The partner list included a man named Graham Forsyth, who had published several articles on expedited conservatorship proceedings in South Carolina. Expedited, meaning fast, meaning they didn't want to give me time to fight back. I called my own attorney, Russell Pratt, a man I'd trusted for 30 years. His receptionist said he was unavailable. I asked when he'd be free. She hesitated before saying he was in a meeting that might run all afternoon. Something about her tone made me uneasy. Brenda knocked on my door 40 minutes later, carrying a manila folder thick enough to prop open a warehouse door. "Mr. Callaway, you're going to want to sit down for this." Derek had accessed 347 files in the past 4 months. Financial statements, insurance policies, real estate appraisals, the company's client contracts. My personal medical records, which he had no authorization to view. He'd printed copies of my will, my trust documents, and the shareholder agreement that gave me sole control of the company. "There's more," Brenda said quietly. "He's been emailing someone at Meridian Legal Group." I couldn't read the contents because they were sent from his personal email, but the server logs show he accessed the company Wi-Fi to send 41 messages to a Graham Forsyth. 41 messages. 3 months of correspondence with an elder law attorney. My son had been planning this while sitting in my conference room, eating lunch I paid for, driving a company truck I provided. Brenda, I need one more thing. Pull Derek's expense reports for the past quarter. The expense reports revealed 4 round trips to Atlanta, charged to the company account, and categorized as client development meetings. Each trip coincided with dates when I'd been out of town on business. He'd been flying to Atlanta to meet with lawyers about stripping me of my independence while billing the travel to my own company. I sat in my office until the sun went down, reading every document, cross-referencing dates, building a timeline of betrayal. At 8:47 p.m., I found the detail that made my blood turn cold. Derek had requested a copy of the company's Keyman insurance policy. The policy paid $12 million if I became permanently incapacitated or was declared legally incompetent. They weren't just planning to take my company. They were planning to cash in on my destruction. I drove home to my house on Sullivan's Island, a place Diane and I had bought 30 years ago when the neighborhood was still affordable. The ocean air usually calmed me. Tonight it felt like breathing through wet concrete. I poured myself a glass of bourbon, then remembered the voicemail. Don't drink the scotch. I stared at the liquor cabinet where Derek had given me an expensive bottle of Macallan 25 for my birthday last month, a gift I hadn't opened yet. I put my bourbon down untouched. I put the Macallan in a Ziploc bag and locked it in my bedroom safe. If someone was warning me about what I drank, I wasn't taking chances. Sleep didn't come. I lay in bed listening to the waves and reconstructing every interaction with Derek and his wife, Monica, over the past year. Monica, who had started commenting on my forgetfulness at every family dinner. Monica, who had suggested I see Dr. Kirkland for a routine cognitive screening. Monica, who had quietly befriended my housekeeper and asked probing questions about my daily habits, my medication, whether I ever seemed confused. I dismissed it as concern. Now I recognized it as surveillance. At 6 a.m., I made coffee and called the one person I trusted completely. My younger brother, Frank, who lived in Savannah and ran a small fishing charter business. Frank and I had never been competitive. He'd chosen the simple life while I chased empire, and we'd respected each other's choices for 60 years. Bobby, at 6 in the morning, someone better be dead. Frank, I need you to come to Charleston today. Don't tell anyone. Especially don't tell Derek. He heard something in my voice that killed any protest. I'll be there by noon. Frank arrived at 11:40, sunburned and smelling like diesel fuel. I sat him at the kitchen table and laid out everything. The voicemail, the server logs, the expense reports, the Meridian Legal Group, the Keyman insurance policy. He read through the documents without speaking. When he finished, he took off his reading glasses and set them on the table with the careful precision of a man trying not to break something. Bobby, I'm going to ask you a question, and I need you to answer honestly. Is there any chance you're misreading this? Read the insurance policy request. He asked for a payout scenario based on a conservatorship ruling. Frank read it again. His jaw tightened. That boy sat at your Thanksgiving table 5 months ago and asked you to pass the gravy, and he was already planning this. I need your help. But first, I need to understand the full scope of what they're doing. I'm going to spend this week pretending everything is normal while I gather evidence. Frank stayed in the guest room. We established a routine. During the day, I performed the role of a happy retiree-to-be. I visited the venue. I approved the catering menu. I told Derek and Monica how grateful I was that they were organizing such a beautiful send-off. Every evening, Frank and I locked ourselves in my study and built our case. Monday morning, I went to the appointment Monica had scheduled with Dr. Kirkland. Frank drove me and waited in the parking lot with a voice recorder running on his phone, connected to the wireless microphone I'd clipped inside my collar. Dr. Kirkland's office smelled like artificial lavender. He was a thin man in his 50s, with the practiced warmth of someone who dealt professionally with vulnerable people. He asked me to count backward from 100 by sevens, draw a clock face, remember 3 words after a 5-minute delay. Standard cognitive tests. I passed every one flawlessly. Then he leaned forward and said, Robert, your family has expressed some concerns about recent episodes. Confusion, difficulty with complex decisions, some personality changes. Have you noticed anything like that? My family told you this? Your daughter-in-law mentioned several incidents. She's very worried. What specific incidents? He consulted his notes. Forgetting where you parked at the grocery store. Repeating the same story at dinner. Difficulty operating the television remote. Leaving the stove on twice last month. None of it was true. I hadn't forgotten where I parked since 1987. I'd told a few stories more than once, but so does everyone over 60. And Diane had been the cook. I barely used the stove at all. Doctor, who arranged this appointment? Your daughter-in-law called 2 weeks ago. She said you'd agreed to come in. Did she mention anything about a legal proceeding? His pause told me everything. She mentioned the family was considering protective measures. For your own safety, of course. I stood up. Dr. Kirkland, I'm going to have my own physician conduct an independent evaluation. I'd recommend you review the ethical guidelines for performing assessments at the request of a patient's family members without proper consent. His face went pale. Frank told me later that the recording captured every word in perfect clarity. Tuesday, I visited my attorney Russell Pratt's office without an appointment. His receptionist tried to redirect me, but I walked past her desk and opened his door. Russell was on the phone. He hung up immediately when he saw my face. Bobby, I was going to call you. Were you before or after my son filed the conservatorship petition? The silence confirmed it. Russell couldn't meet my eyes. He straightened the papers on his desk 3 times before speaking. Derek came to me a month ago. He said he was worried about your mental state. He asked about the legal process for protective oversight. I told him I'd look into it. You represent me, Russell. You've represented me for 30 years. And you provided legal guidance to the person trying to take away my rights. I thought I was helping your family. You breached your fiduciary duty. You shared privileged information about my assets, my estate plan, and my medical history with an adverse party. That's not helping my family. That's malpractice. I pulled a letter from my jacket. This is formal notice of termination of your services. My new attorney, Catherine Zhao, from Zhao and Associates, will be contacting your office for the complete transfer of my files. And Russell, Catherine is also a member of the State Bar's Ethics Committee. I'd suggest getting your own lawyer. Russell's face crumbled. 20 years of friendship and 30 years of professional trust, gone in 90 seconds. He deserved every bit of it. Catherine Zhao was a woman I'd met through the Charleston Chamber of Commerce. Brilliant, aggressive, and famous for winning an elder abuse case against a prominent real estate developer 2 years ago. I'd called her Sunday night, and by Monday afternoon she had a legal strategy that made my old battle plans for shipping contracts look like kindergarten drawings. Robert, she said during our Tuesday afternoon meeting, what your son is attempting is a form of elder financial abuse under South Carolina law. Combined with the fraudulent medical assessment, the breach of fiduciary duty by your former attorney, and the insurance fraud angle, we have grounds for both civil and criminal proceedings. I don't want to send my son to prison. You might not have a choice. But first, let's talk about the retirement party. Catherine's plan was elegant. Rather than canceling the event, we would use it. 200 witnesses, many of them business associates who could attest to my competence. A carefully orchestrated revelation that would destroy Derek's case before it ever reached a courtroom, and documentation so thorough that no judge in South Carolina would grant a conservatorship. Wednesday, I had the Macallan bottle tested at a private laboratory. The results came back Thursday morning. The scotch contained a benzodiazepine, a sedative that would cause confusion, memory gaps, and disorientation. If I'd been drinking it regularly before my cognitive evaluation, I would have presented exactly the symptoms Monica had described to Dr. Kirkland. They had tried to drug me. I sat in my truck in the laboratory parking lot and cried for the first time since Diane's funeral. Not because I was afraid. Because my son, the boy I'd carried on my shoulders through the 4th of July parade, the teenager I'd driven to baseball practice 300 times, the young man I'd handed the keys to his first truck, that boy had put poison in a bottle of scotch and watched me unwrap it with a smile on his face. Frank found me there an hour later. He didn't say anything. He just sat in the passenger seat and waited until I was ready to drive. Thursday and Friday I continued performing. I called Derek to discuss the seating chart. I told Monica the party was going to be wonderful. I even mentioned that I'd finally opened that Macallan, and it was the smoothest scotch I'd ever tasted. Over the phone, I could practically hear Monica's relief. "I'm so glad you're enjoying it, Dad. You deserve to relax. I've been having a glass every evening. It helps me sleep." "That's wonderful. You know, you've seemed a little more forgetful lately. Maybe the stress of retirement." "You're probably right. Thank goodness I have you and Derek looking out for me." Friday evening, Frank and I conducted our final review. Every document organized, every recording backed up to 3 separate devices. Catherine Zhao had prepared legal filings ready for submission Monday morning. The audiovisual company had installed wireless speakers throughout the Harbor Grand Ballroom under the guise of upgrading the sound system for the live band. My personal physician, Dr. Okonkwo, had conducted a comprehensive cognitive evaluation that afternoon, certifying me as mentally sharp with 0 signs of impairment. Saturday arrived with the kind of warm Charleston evening that makes you understand why people fight wars over this city. Spanish moss hung from live oaks along the waterfront. The Harbor Grand Ballroom glowed with string lights reflected off the harbor. 200 guests filled the room, including 43 relatives Frank had quietly contacted during the week. People Derek hadn't invited because they knew me too well to believe I was losing my mind. Derek had organized the event with impressive attention to detail. I had to give him that. The decorations were tasteful. The band played jazz standards Diane would have loved, and the catering featured every dish I'd ever mentioned enjoying. From the outside, it looked like a loving son honoring his father's legacy. I arrived at 6 sharp wearing my best suit and the new watch I'd bought at Whitfield Jewelers. Derek greeted me at the entrance with a handshake that lingered too long, his eyes scanning my face for signs of sedative-induced confusion. "Dad, you look great. How are you feeling?" "Never better. That Macallan you gave me really does help with sleep." Monica appeared beside him, radiant in a blue dress, her smile precisely calibrated between affection and assessment. "We're so proud of you, Dad. 41 years. What an incredible achievement." "Thank you, sweetheart. I couldn't have done it without family." The word family landed exactly where I intended it. Cocktail hour buzzed with conversation. Business partners shared stories about early deals. Employees thanked me for decades of fair treatment. My brother Frank worked the room with quiet purpose, making sure certain relatives were seated at tables with clear sight lines to the podium. Aunt Helen from Beaufort pulled me aside near the bar. "Bobby, Frank told me what's happening. I want you to know every person at table 9 is here because they love you and they know exactly who you are." "Thank you, Helen. Just watch and listen tonight. That's all I ask." Dinner was served at 7:30. Shrimp and grits, filet mignon, peach cobbler. The kind of meal that costs $50 a plate and tastes like 100. I ate slowly, savoring every bite while Derek and Monica whispered at their seats, occasionally glancing at me with the nervous energy of people waiting for a verdict. At 8:45, Derek took the microphone. He gave a polished speech about my career, my dedication, my legacy. He talked about how the company would continue to thrive under new leadership. He mentioned, casually, that he and Monica would be taking over daily operations to ease my transition into a well-deserved rest. The crowd applauded. I applauded too, smiling like a man who didn't understand what new leadership actually meant. Then Derek said the words I'd been waiting for. "And now, I'd like to invite my father to say a few words." I stood slowly, buttoned my jacket, walked to the podium with the measured pace of a man who'd addressed shareholders, union negotiators, and Port Authority officials for 4 decades. The microphone was warm in my hand. 200 faces looked up at me with affection and expectation. "Thank you, Derek. That was a beautiful speech. You've always had a way with words." Polite laughter. I let it settle. 41 years ago, I started Callaway Coastal Freight with a pickup truck and a promise. Diane was pregnant with Derek at the time. We had $3,200 in savings and a mortgage we could barely afford. Every decision I made was for this family. Every long night, every difficult contract, every risk I took was because I believed that family was worth building something for. I paused. The room was perfectly silent. Tonight, I want to talk about trust, because trust is the foundation of everything. A business, a marriage, a family. When trust breaks, everything built on top of it comes crashing down. Derek shifted in his seat. Monica reached for her water glass. 3 months ago, my son began meeting with an elder law attorney in Atlanta named Graham Forsyth at Meridian Legal Group. I know this because he billed 4 round-trip flights to Atlanta on the company expense account and labeled them as client development meetings. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Derek's face went rigid. The purpose of those meetings was to file a conservatorship petition against me. For those unfamiliar with the term, a conservatorship would strip me of my legal rights, give someone else control of my finances, my property, my business, and my personal decisions. My son was planning to have me declared mentally incompetent. The murmur became a wave of shocked whispers. Aunt Helen gripped the edge of her table. Frank stood near the back wall, arms crossed, watching Derek. To support this petition, my daughter-in-law Monica arranged a cognitive evaluation with Dr. Gerald Kirkland without my informed consent. She provided Dr. Izan Kirkland with fabricated accounts of my supposed confusion, memory loss, and inability to function independently. Monica's face drained of color. She grabbed Derek's arm. He didn't move. Furthermore, I had a bottle of scotch tested at an independent laboratory this week. A bottle my son gave me as a birthday gift. That bottle contained a benzodiazepine, a sedative that causes exactly the kind of confusion and memory problems Monica described to the doctor. The room exploded. Guests stood from their chairs. Someone at table 4 shouted an obscenity. My cousin Richard, a retired pharmacist, turned to stare at Derek with undisguised horror. I waited for the noise to subside. When I spoke again, my voice was steady as a ship's hull. My son also approached my former attorney, Russell Pratt, who provided legal guidance about my estate and assets despite representing me for 30 years. That is a direct violation of attorney-client privilege and fiduciary duty. Mr. Pratt has been terminated and reported to the South Carolina Bar Association. Dad, stop. Derek stood up, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. You're confused. This is exactly what we were worried about. You're having an episode. Am I? I reached into my jacket and produced a sealed envelope. This is the result of a comprehensive cognitive evaluation conducted yesterday by Dr. Adaize Okonkwo, a board-certified neurologist at the Medical University of South Carolina. My cognitive function scores are in the 93rd percentile for my age group. My memory, executive function, and decision-making abilities are classified as superior. I held up a second document, and this is a toxicology report confirming the presence of triazolam in the bottle of Macallan 25 my son gave me on September 14th. The concentration was sufficient to cause significant cognitive impairment if consumed regularly over several weeks. Derek's face shifted from desperate to furious. You have no right to do this. That's a family matter. You made it a legal matter when you hired attorneys, falsified medical reports, and drugged your own father. And since we're discussing legal matters, I should mention that my new attorney, Catherine Zhao, will be filing a civil complaint on Monday morning. She's also referred the drugging evidence to the Charleston County District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation. Monica bolted from her chair and ran toward the bathroom. 2 of my nieces blocked her path, not physically, but their presence was enough to stop her. She stood in the middle of the ballroom, mascara running, surrounded by 200 people who now knew exactly what she was. There's one more thing, I said, and the room fell silent again. Last week, I revised my will and trust documents. The bulk of my estate and my controlling interest in Callaway Coastal Freight will be placed in a charitable trust benefiting the South Carolina Maritime Workers Foundation and the Medical University Scholarship Fund. I looked at Frank, standing quietly by the back wall. My brother Frank will serve as trustee of the foundation, with a generous annual stipend and full authority over distributions. Frank, who never asked me for $1 in his life, but who drove 3 hours on 6 hours' notice because I needed him. Frank nodded once, his eyes glistening under the chandelier light. My niece Sarah, who spent every Saturday for 2 years driving my wife to chemotherapy appointments, will receive the Sullivan's Island property and a trust fund I've established for her children's education. Sarah, seated at table 9, covered her mouth with both hands. Her husband put his arm around her shoulders. Derek will receive nothing. His access to company systems has been revoked as of this morning. His company vehicle is to be returned by Monday. And if he or Monica attempt to contact me, my attorney will seek a restraining order. Derek stood frozen beside his overturned chair, his face cycling through rage, disbelief, and something that might have been the beginning of shame. The room watched him with the horrified fascination of people witnessing a bridge collapse. One last thing, and then I'll let everyone get back to enjoying this excellent peach cobbler. A few nervous laughs. I want to address something directly. Some of you might wonder whether I bear some responsibility for how my son turned out. I've asked myself that question every night this week. I worked too much. I missed too many baseball games. I let money substitute for presence. When Diane was alive, she held this family together with love. I didn't always match with my own attention. The room was absolutely still. But there is a line between a parent's imperfection and a child's choice to commit fraud. I may have been an absent father at times, but I never taught my son to steal. I never taught him to drug an old man. He chose that path, and tonight he answers for it. I set the microphone on the podium and walked back to my seat. The silence lasted 4 full seconds before Aunt Helen began clapping. Then Frank. Then Table 9. Then the entire room, a standing ovation that shook the chandeliers and rattled the champagne flutes. Derek tried to speak 3 times. Each time the applause drowned him out. Finally, he grabbed Monica's arm and pulled her toward the exit. They passed through a gauntlet of relatives who stepped aside without a word, their silence more devastating than any insult. At the door, Derek turned back. Our eyes met across the length of the ballroom. I saw the boy who'd cried about his dog. I saw the man who'd poisoned my scotch. Both existed in the same face, and I didn't know which one broke my heart more. He left without speaking. The party continued for another 2 hours, though the mood had shifted from celebration to something more complex. People came to my table in a steady stream, offering support, sharing their own stories of family betrayal, promising to testify if needed. My cousin Richard volunteered to provide expert analysis of the toxicology report. A business partner named Walsh offered his corporate security team to monitor any retaliation from Derek. Frank sat beside me for most of it, drinking sweet tea and watching the harbor lights dance on the water. At one point he leaned over and said, "Diane would have handled this differently." How? She would have confronted him privately, given him a chance to confess, tried to find the good in him first. Do you think she'd be right? Frank was quiet for a long time. I think she'd have been kinder. I don't think she'd have been wrong about the outcome, though. Some people choose greed over love, and no amount of kindness changes that arithmetic. I nodded. The harbor breeze carried the smell of salt and pluff mud through the open windows. 200 feet away, a container ship moved slowly toward open water, its navigation lights blinking against the dark sky. I'd loaded thousands of those ships over my career. Tonight, watching one depart, I felt like cargo myself, being carried toward something unknown. The cleanup crew arrived at 11. I stayed until the last table was cleared, the last chair stacked, the last string light unplugged. The Harbor Grand Ballroom returned to silence, the kind of emptiness that follows any event where too much truth gets told. Frank drove me home. The Sullivan's Island house was dark, except for the porch light Diane had installed 20 years ago, the one she said would always guide me home. I stood on the porch listening to the waves, while Frank made decaf coffee in the kitchen. My phone showed 14 missed calls from Derek. I didn't listen to the voicemails. Catherine Zhao had advised no contact, and for once in my life I was going to follow someone else's instructions. Monday morning brought 3 things. Catherine filed the civil complaint against Derek, Monica, Russell Pratt, and Dr. Kirkland. The Charleston County DA opened a preliminary investigation into the drugging allegation, and Brenda called to inform me that Derek had shown up at the office at 7 a.m., demanding access to his desk, and been escorted out by security. He was crying. "Mr. Calloway," Brenda said softly. "He kept saying you didn't understand." "I understand perfectly, Brenda. That's the problem." The weeks that followed brought the grinding machinery of legal consequence. Russell Pratt resigned from his firm before the bar investigation concluded, saving himself formal disbarment but ending a 40-year career in disgrace. Dr. Kirkland's medical license was suspended pending review after Catherine's complaint documented the unauthorized evaluation. Graham Forsyth at Meridian Legal Group quietly withdrew from the conservatorship filing and refunded Derek's retainer, presumably wanting no association with a case that now included criminal drug charges. Derek sent letters. Long, handwritten pages that arrived every few days, each one a different mixture of apology, justification, and anger. Monica had convinced him I was declining. The gambling debts had made him desperate. The insurance payout was Monica's idea. He never meant to hurt me. He loved me. He was sorry. I read every letter. I kept them in a box on my desk beside a photograph of Derek at age 7, standing on the bow of a tugboat with his arms spread wide, laughing into the Charleston wind. The boy in that photograph and the man who wrote those letters shared the same handwriting. I couldn't reconcile the two, and I'd stopped trying. Sarah moved into the Sullivan's Island house 3 months later when I relocated to a smaller place in the historic district. She painted the guest room yellow for her daughter and kept Diane's rose garden exactly as it was. Every Sunday she brought the kids over for lunch, and I taught my great niece how to tie bowline knots, the same way I'd taught Derek 40 years ago. Frank ran the foundation with the same easy competence he brought to his fishing charters. The Maritime Workers Fund distributed its first scholarships in January, helping 12 dock workers' children attend college. Diane would have liked that. She always said, the people who loaded the ships deserved as much as the people who owned them. Some nights I sit on my new porch, smaller than the old one, but with the same view of the harbor, and I think about what Frank said. Diane would have been kinder. Maybe she would have been right to be. Maybe confronting Derek privately would have saved something worth saving. Or maybe the poison in that Scotch bottle was the answer to every hypothetical, the proof that some betrayals are too calculated for mercy. I don't know. I'm 67 years old, and the one thing 4 decades of business taught me is that certainty is a luxury honest people can't afford. What I know is this: my company is safe. My mind is sharp. My brother sits across from me at Sunday lunch arguing about football, and my great niece calls me Pop Pop and asks me to tell the tugboat story one more time. The people who showed up for me when it mattered are the people who sit at my table now. Derek's criminal case is still pending. His marriage to Monica ended 3 weeks after the party. I heard he's working at a car dealership in Colombia, selling Hyundais on commission. Part of me hopes he finds his way. A larger part knows that hope costs nothing, and I've already paid enough. The harbor lights still blink at night, guiding ships toward open water. I watch them from my porch and think about foundations. Not the concrete kind, though I understand those too. The kind that hold a family together or let it collapse. The kind you build with time and trust and presence. And the kind that crumble when someone decides money matters more than love. Diane's porch light still burns at the Sullivan's Island house. Sarah keeps it on, same as always. Some nights, driving past on my way home from Frank's, I slow down just to see it glowing through the live oaks. A small, steady light in the darkness, doing exactly what it was built to do, guiding someone home. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.